Mike Flanagan movie and TV show. Ranked in just a decade, Mike Flanagan turned from a wannabe filmmaker to one of the most influential voices in contemporary horror. Flanagan's first feature film, Absentia, had to be crowdfunded to see the light of day, but now Flanagan keeps signing big-budget contracts to produce his movies and TV shows with an enviable collection of successes in his career. That's the most challenging part of ranking Flanagan's work, as there's not a single lousy production in the filmmaker's history. Sure, some of Flanagan's films and series hit harder than others, having a lasting effect that'll forever haunt our sleepless nights. Some projects can also be flawed, unable to give fruition to Flanagan's ambitious storytelling for one reason or another. Nevertheless, Flanagan has been so far incapable of delivering something that we couldn't recommend to horror fans. Ranking all of Mike Flanagan's films and TV shows then is less about creating a distinction between the good and the bad than pointing out in which productions the filmmaker was better able to mix the terrors of the night with the aches of the human condition. So the following ranking has the ambitious task of evaluating how each of Flanagan's films and series craft a cohesive experience while also using horror to explore trauma. While it's perfectly fine to disagree with some of the ranking positions, we'll try to justify each entry, aware that all of these films and series deserve to be appreciated anyway. Let's get to it then. It's time to wake some ghosts. There's not a single redeeming quality in 2014's Ouija. From planning to execution, Ouija fails even to be a generic horror movie, as it has inconsistent pacing, awful character development, and bland scares. However, with a box office of more than $100 million, a sequel, or in this case, prequel, to Ouija was bound to happen. Lucky for us, Flanagan was chosen to helm 2016's Ouija, Origin of Evil, a prequel film that delivers one of the most impressive course corrections in the history of cinema. Ouija, Origin of Evil has everything that the original movie didn't, with a terrifying tale that still finds time to discuss how ghosts represent the hope of getting in touch with loved ones we have lost along the way. If you are looking for a classic horror story, Ouija, Origin of Evil won't let you down, perfectly capable of standing together with James Wan's Insidious or Andrea Overdoll's The Autopsy of Jane Doe. Why'd rank it so low on this list, then? Well, while there's a lot to love about Ouija, Origin of Evil, this is still a movie constricted by the limitations of a franchise, something that doesn't give Flanagan a lot of breathing room. Even if it's a solid horror experience, Ouija, Origin of Evil feels a little bit too classic to rise above Flanagan's bolder projects. At the same time that Flanagan directed Ouija, Origin of Evil from a script he wrote with Jeff Howard, the duo worked on a second script together. Contrary to Ouija, Origin of Evil, 2016's Before I Wake gave Flanagan total creative freedom, which allowed him to craft the unique concept of a boy whose dreams come true. Before I Wake explores how our mind creates nightmares from our suppressed memories, allowing Flanagan to introduce an original monster, the Cankerman. Nevertheless, the monster is not the most disturbing aspect of Before I Wake, as the film also asks how far we would be willing to go to spend one last moment with a dead loved one. While Before I Wake is not the first story about parents dealing with the death of their infant child, the film does a great job of shifting the focus to the living and their actions, showing the terrifying consequences of putting memories before present life. Unfortunately, Before I Wake crumbles in the third act when Flanagan transforms the dark fantasy into a full-blown horror movie that never has the same emotional impact. Even worse is the unnecessary exposition put in place to make sure the public understands every nuance of the story. Nevertheless, regardless of its shortcomings, Before I Wake is a magical tale about grief, a theme that Flanagan artfully explores in all his work. Flanagan's first film, Absentia, was funded entirely via a Kickstarter campaign, showing how little money there was to produce an ambitious feature-length project. Flanagan used his own home as a set and counted on a terrific cast to make the most of Absentia. Even so, the micro-budget still hurts the film, as it stops Flanagan from delivering the climax the film builds up to. Absentia is the story of a pregnant woman, Courtney Bell, dealing with the disappearance of her husband, Morgan Peter Brown, supported by her addicted sister, Katie Parker. However, Absentia is also about creatures that live under bridges and kidnap humans for evil purposes. When the film leans on the horrors of human life, based on Stephen King's novel of the same name, Gerald's Game follows a woman named Jessie Carla Gugino, who is handcuffed to a bed by her husband, Gerald Bruce Greenwood, right before he has a heart attack and dies. With no neighbors to hear her screams and no way to free herself, Jessie starts to reflect upon her life and the abusive relationships she had with both her husband and her father. The events of the novel happen mainly in a single room and inside a character's mind, so we wouldn't expect it to become an engaging visual experience. Even so, Flanagan's adaptation of Gerald's Game is as thrilling as it is gut-wrenching. Flanagan uses some clever tricks to bring Jesse's inner monologues to life, and the story is so attentively crafted that it feels like King's novel was always supposed to become a film. Gerald's Game's sin is in being too faithful to the original material. We all love King's work, but we've got to admit the master of horror has some issues with giving proper endings to his novels. Dreamcatcher, Under the Dome, I'm looking to all of you. Unfortunately, Flanagan's adaptation reproduces a plot twist that's hard to swallow and worse, takes the focus away from Jesse's inner struggle just for the sake of a horror thrill. As a result, Gerald's Game's final minutes reduce the impact of a story that's all about a woman's liberation, and it would be best if Flanagan took more creative liberties with the film. Almost 4 decades after The Shining became one of the greatest classics of horror cinema, Dr. Sleep hit theaters with the dual intention of continuing Stanley Kubrick's vision and at the same time including the fantastic elements of Stephen King's original book. Few directors could tackle this challenge and be successful, but Flanagan does precisely that. On top of uniting Kubrick's and King's voices, Dr. Sleep is a big-budget horror film that incorporates elements of adventure and fantasy in order to appeal to a wider audience, while still building complex characters and dealing with their inner demons. It's fascinating, layered, and unfortunately, a little too ambitious for its own sake. Even if Flanagan does a wonderful job with Dr. Sleep, the movie stretches the limits of public attention during 3 hours that jump from contemplative reflection to action set pieces. Considering that Flanagan cut a lot of details from the original novel to make its massive story fit the film, we could wonder if Dr. Sleep wouldn't be a better fit for a limited series format, so it would have the time to explore the rich universe in a more cohesive fashion. Flanagan's Dr. Sleep is a worthy adaptation of King's novel, but it's still too uneven to be considered the best film of his career. The Midnight Club has everything a Flanagan series needs to be unforgettable. A great cast of characters, discussions about human mortality, and a mystery that will keep the audience guessing until the last moment. The only reason the show ranks so low on this list is that the series feels somewhat uneven by the end of the season. This could have been fixed in the future if Flanagan and co-creator Leigh Fong got a series renewal at Netflix, but that never happened. However, as it is, The Midnight Club was obviously conceived as a story that should take more than 10 episodes to develop, and 1 season alone feels a little incomplete. Even so, Flanagan's first experience with teen horror is highly successful. Also thanks to The Midnight Club never shying away from challenging subjects. Even though The Midnight Club is trying to reach a younger audience, the show is still about accepting death to enjoy life and deals with controversial themes such as suicide, drug abuse, and STDs. The show has its fair share of chills and thrills, exploring the idea of a cult dedicated to prolonging life and healing the human body, no matter the cost. However, the heart of the story is its cast of terminal young patients, grasping whatever pleasure they can have before inevitably going to the grave. The fall of the House of Usher follows the deterioration of a corrupt and decadent family. By 2023, Flanagan had already shown that he was a master of adaptations, especially when it comes to horror writers. However, with The Fall of the House of Usher, based on the works of Edgar Allan Poe, he took it to a new level. Like many of Flanagan's shows, each episode of the 10-episode season follows a different member of the extensive Usher family, but these episodes follow specific Poe stories as well. What makes Flanagan so good at adaptations is not only his understanding of the source material, but also his willingness to deviate from it with his own vision. Nevertheless, despite the beautiful cinematography and use of color throughout, House of Usher is still a rather conventional horror tale, even if it has some stunning,